Aliens never understood Earth. To them, planets were supposed to be stable and predictable. Their worlds had mild climates, balanced ecosystems, and food chains that made sense. Then they looked at Earth, and it felt like staring into madness. The very air could kill you with disease. The oceans could swallow entire civilizations. Even the ground beneath human feet refused to stay still, shifting with earthquakes and eruptions. For aliens, survival was about avoiding danger. For humans, it was about facing danger every single day. From birth, a human body is tested. A child can fall, break a bone, bleed, and still recover. A fever may burn through them, but the immune system learns and becomes stronger. Hunger teaches them to hunt or create. Cold winters and hot summers teach them to endure extremes. Where other species would collapse under pressure, humans adapt, often in ways that seem reckless to outsiders. To an alien, watching a human eat something toxic, cough, and then still survive is terrifying. What makes humans unique is not their strength or speed. Many alien species are physically stronger or faster. What sets humans apart is endurance. They can run for hours, sometimes days, chasing prey until the prey simply collapses. They can live with pain, pushing through injuries that would end another creature's life. Pain is not just tolerated, it is normalized. Humans even train themselves to seek discomfort through exercise, combat training, and even sport. That when real pain comes, they are ready, but it goes beyond the body. The human mind is just as much a survival tool as their muscles and bones. When faced with impossible situations, humans improvise. If they lack weapons, they build them. If they lack food, they invent new ways to grow or find it. If an environment is too hostile, they don't retreat, they adapt. They turn deserts into farms, frozen lands into cities, and forests into roads. This constant problem-solving is something many alien species, who evolved in safer conditions, never had to develop. Aliens consider humans chaotic because they do not follow strict patterns, but that chaos is exactly what makes them dangerous. A predator on Earth learns to expect the unexpected. The moment prey changes behavior, the predator has to adapt or starve. Humans grew up in this constant game of adaptation. That is why in war, they never fight the same way twice. They will use the environment, the enemy's own technology, or even their own bodies as weapons. To them, survival matters more than order. Perhaps the most frightening trait of humans is their ability to cooperate. Many predators on other planets are solitary hunters, relying only on themselves. Humans, however, learned that survival often depends on community. They hunt in groups, build in groups, and fight in groups. They will risk their own lives to save another. To aliens, this is illogical. To humans, it is instinct. And when that instinct is combined with their resilience, it creates something more than soldiers. It creates warriors who never truly stand alone. In the end, Earth is the forge, and humans are the steel it tempered. Their planet shaped them into survivors who are not just adapted to danger, but born from it. This is what the alien empire never realized. When they asked for soldiers, they weren't just recruiting botties, they were unleashing the product of the most dangerous training ground in known space, a death world called Earth. When the alien empire first considered humans for military service, their expectations were simple. They didn't want leaders, innovators, or unpredictable fighters. They wanted soldiers, nothing more, nothing less. To the alien generals, a soldier was someone who followed orders without hesitation, maintained discipline, and performed the same action 1,000 times if told to. Their own armies had been drilled into a machine-like precision, each unit functioning like a gear in a vast war engine. That was the standard they believed all soldiers should meet. When they looked at humans, they saw only the surface. Humans were smaller than many alien species, with fragile bones compared to armored exoskeletons or dense hides. Their weapons, at least by galactic standards, seemed primitive. Even their lifespans were short. To the Empire, this was perfect. Humans could be trained quickly, deployed in numbers, and replaced without much consequence. In their minds, Earth was a planet full of disposable recruits. The generals thought they understood humanity because they had studied their history. They saw centuries of human warfare, but they misread it. They focused only on the organization, ranks, uniforms, drills, formations. They ignored the chaos that lived under the surface. They saw Roman legions marching in step, but not the brutality of their campaigns. They saw modern armies with tanks and jets, but not the guerrilla fighters hiding in jungles or deserts. They saw nuclear weapons and thought humans relied only on technology, when in truth, Humans relied on adaptability. The aliens believed that when humans joined their military, they would fall in line. They would march, obey, and fight as they were told. At best, they imagined humans as auxiliary troops, filling the gaps where alien forces were stretched thin. At worst, they thought of them as cannon fodder, bodies to throw at the enemy while the Empire's elite soldiers handled the real fighting. What they did not expect was initiative. What they did not expect was creativity. And what they absolutely did not expect was defiance. During the first training sessions, the Empire's instructors grew frustrated. Humans asked questions. They challenged orders. When told to stand still, they shifted. When told to fight a certain way, they improvised. An alien commander once complained that a human cannot stand in formation for more than 5 minutes, without finding a reason to move. To the aliens, this was insubordination. To humans, it was survival. They weren't used to waiting for someone else to solve problems, they solved them on their own. The aliens also underestimated the human sense of humor. Where alien soldiers treated war as a grim, sacred duty, humans laughed in the face of danger. They made jokes during training. They teased each other while marching. They even mocked their instructors. At first, the Empire saw this as weakness, a sign that humans lacked seriousness, but they did not realize that humor was a weapon. It was how humans endured fear. It was how they kept fighting when logic said they should give up. The Empire expected obedience. What they got was unpredictability. They wanted tools, but they got people who thought for themselves. The irony is that the very traits that made humans frustrating in training, restlessness, curiosity, stubbornness, were the same traits that would later make them terrifying in battle. By the time the alien generals began to suspect their mistake, it was already too late. They had unleashed something they didn't fully understand. They had asked for soldiers who would fit into their machine, but what they got were survivors who broke every rule of war. The first time humans fought beside the alien empire, no one expected much. The generals had placed them in a support role, positioned behind the main lines where the enemy's strongest attacks wouldn't reach. The plan was simple: let the empire's disciplined warriors hold the front while humans provided numbers. If they survived, good. If not, there were always more waiting to be recruited from Earth. But battles rarely go according to plan. The enemy broke through the line faster than anyone predicted. Alien soldiers faltered, their formations collapsing under the pressure. In that chaos, the humans did something no one expected. They surged forward. To the aliens watching, it looked like madness. The humans didn't wait for orders. They didn't retreat to safer ground. They charged. Some had weapons, others barely had time to pick them up. But it didn't matter. They fought with whatever they had: rifles, knives, even jagged pieces of broken armor torn from the battlefield. One report described a human who lost his gun, then grabbed a fallen enemy's blade and kept fighting. Another account told of a soldier who smashed his helmet against an enemy's face when nothing else was left. To the aliens, this was savagery. To the humans, it was instinct. Alien war doctrine was built on predictability. Every squad moved as one, every attack timed to precision. Humans broke that pattern entirely. They fought like predators, adapting to the enemy's every move. When the enemy tried to push with heavy armor, humans swarmed around it, tearing at weak points. When the enemy shifted to ranged fire, humans closed the distance so fast, the shooters panicked. They didn't follow strategy, they became strategy. What shocked the aliens even more was how humans fought after being wounded. An alien soldier, once injured, would retreat for medical attention. Humans did not. A man bleeding from his side still tackled an enemy twice his size. A woman with a broken arm kept firing with the other hand. There were stories of soldiers who should have collapsed from blood loss, but stayed upright until the battle was over. It wasn't discipline. It wasn't training. It was something deeper: a refusal to stop, no matter the cost. The enemy, who had expected to crush this primitive species, soon realized they weren't facing soldiers at all. They were facing survivors. Every human on that battlefield carried the lessons of a death world, and those lessons turned the tide. The Empire's officers watched in disbelief. What they had considered weaknesses, the restlessness, the improvisation, the refusal to obey blindly, suddenly became strength. Humans didn't freeze when formations broke down. They thrived in the chaos. They didn't panic when cut off from command. They made decisions on their own. They didn't crumble under fear. They laughed at it, shouted in defiance, and sometimes even sang as they fought. By the end of that first encounter, the humans had not only held the line, they had pushed it forward. The enemy retreated, shaken by the ferocity of fighters they had dismissed as expendable. The Empire's generals were left in silence, forced to confront a truth they had never considered. They had asked for soldiers. What they got was something far more dangerous. They got fighters who treated war like survival itself, because for them, that's what it was. And once the enemy learned what Deathworlders really meant, even the most hardened alien warriors hesitated at the thought of facing them again. The first real battles changed more than the maps of the war. They changed the way aliens thought about humans. Before, they had dismissed them as primitive recruits. After, they whispered about them with unease, sometimes even with fear. It wasn't just that humans won fights, it was how they fought, and what that revealed about their nature. Alien soldiers were trained to see war as controlled. They fought in formations, obeyed commands, and trusted that the battle would unfold within a set of predictable rules. Facing humans shattered that belief. Humans didn't fight like an army. They fought like a storm, wild, unrelenting, and impossible to control. One alien report described it best. They are not soldiers, they are predators disguised as people. At first, alien officers believed the stories were exaggerated. Panic often makes enemies seem larger than life. But as the reports piled up, a pattern emerged. Entire squads of trained alien warriors had been broken not by superior weapons, but by the psychological weight of facing humans up close. Enemies who thought they could intimidate them found instead that humans laughed, taunted, or even joked while covered in blood. To many aliens, this behavior seemed insane. To humans, it was normal, a way of taking fear and turning it into fuel. The most disturbing discovery for the Empire's generals was that humans didn't give up. Alien species, when facing overwhelming odds, often surrendered or retreated to regroup. Humans did neither. They fought long after victory was impossible, forcing the enemy to pay for every inch of ground. One alien commander wrote, "Even when they know they cannot win, they make you believe you cannot either." This refusal to quit had a deep psychological effect on both sides. Enemies began to hesitate before engaging human units, afraid of what it would cost them, even allies, and the Empire felt uneasy fighting alongside humans. Some alien soldiers admitted they would rather face the enemy than stand next to a human drenched in adrenaline, laughing while reloading a weapon. They couldn't decide if humans were allies or monsters. The alien leadership tried to control the narrative. They banned certain reports from circulating. They told their troops that humans were reckless, unstable, and ultimately fragile. But soldiers talk, and stories spread faster than official orders. Soon, whispers filled the barracks. Humans were unkillable. Humans didn't feel pain. Humans were Deathworld demons wearing flesh. The myth of the Deathworlders was born not from propaganda, but from experience. It wasn't just the enemy or the rank-and-file soldiers who felt the change. The Empire's commanders, who once saw humans as tools, now treated them with caution. They noticed how quickly humans adapted. In every battle, humans learned faster than expected. A tactic that worked once would never work again. An ambush would be spotted the next time. Even alien technology, when picked up on the battlefield, was turned against its owners within minutes. It was as though the humans absorbed knowledge simply by surviving long enough to see it in action. For the first time, the Empire's generals realized they were not dealing with a disposable species. They were dealing with something they didn't fully understand. A species that had been underestimated, not because it was weak, but because it was too dangerous to measure by ordinary standards. The psychological impact rippled far beyond the front lines. The enemy, once confident in their superiority, began to speak cautiously about human encounters. The Empire's soldiers looked at their human allies with a mix of awe and dread, and the humans themselves. They carried on as if nothing was unusual. To them, survival was simply survival. They couldn't understand why the others were so shocked. For humans, this was just another day. By the end of these first campaigns, the word Deathworlder had become a warning. It no longer meant simply a person from Earth, it meant something more. It meant a fighter who would never stop, never surrender, and never let fear decide the outcome. And once that reputation spread, the galaxy realized a terrifying truth. Humans didn't just fight wars, they changed them. The Empire thought they were hiring soldiers. What they got instead was a force that began to reshape the entire concept of war. Once humans entered the conflict, the galaxy could no longer fight the same way it had before. Every army, every general, and every strategist was forced to reconsider what it meant to face a Deathworlder. At first, the changes were subtle. Human victories were treated as lucky accidents, moments of chaos that happened to work in their favor. But luck doesn't repeat itself over and over. As the campaigns stretched on, patterns emerged. Where humans fought, enemies fell back. Where humans held ground, it stayed held. And where humans advanced, they often did so with fewer numbers but higher success than anyone predicted. It became clear that humans weren't just another tool in the Empire's arsenal, they were something altogether new. Other species began to study them. Reports circulated across fleets and academies. Some described humans as reckless, others as brilliant, but all agreed on one point: humans changed the rules. Alien commanders used to plan wars like games of strategy, where every piece on the board behaved in predictable ways. Humans shattered that model. They didn't just play the game differently, they flipped the board entirely. An army that expected a clean, ordered battle often found itself ambushed, flanked, or outmaneuvered by tactics no textbook had ever imagined. The enemy, once confident, began to dread human deployments. They prepared countermeasures, but nothing seemed to work twice. A trap that caught one squad would be spotted instantly by the next. A weapon that devastated an army one day would be turned against its creators the next. It wasn't just that humans survived, it was that they learned, faster than anyone else. In the span of months, they adapted to technologies and strategies that had taken other species centuries to develop. Within the Empire itself, attitudes shifted. At first, humans were considered auxiliary expendable bodies to fill gaps. But soon, commanders began requesting them specifically, not because they wanted replacements, but because they wanted results. The Empire had advanced weapons, starships, and strategies. But when the tide of war grew uncertain, it was the death they trusted to hold the line. This transformation came with a price. Fear and respect often walked together, and for many, humans became something to be wary of. Some alien allies admitted they would never fully trust a species that could smile while covered in blood, or make jokes in the middle of a battlefield. Others whispered that humans were too dangerous to remain allies once the war ended. Or, if they could terrify the enemy, what would stop them from terrifying their supposed friends? But for the first time in centuries, the galaxy had to acknowledge Earth as more than an overlooked world. Humans had proven themselves not just as fighters, but as survivors who could change the outcome of wars. Their presence forced every empire to rethink its place in the cosmic order. Were Deathworlders a threat? Or were they the only hope against enemies that had once seemed unstoppable? The larger lesson was unavoidable. The galaxy had always measured strength in terms of technology, numbers, and discipline. Humans showed that strength was something else entirely. It was the will to adapt, to endure, and to fight, even when defeat seemed certain. It was the kind of strength only a Deathworld could forge. By the end of those first campaigns, no one saw humans as disposable anymore. They were not just soldiers, they were the unpredictable element that no strategy could contain. The Empire had asked for an army. Instead, they had awakened a force of nature, and once unleashed, that force could never be controlled again.